Welcome to the C. Warren Library. Today we have a meeting to learn about one of the newest projects in Woodbridge Township, which is the Living Shoreline, which is going to be right down the street here. And we're going to be building a new kind of shoreline that is not anywhere in this area of New Jersey right now. And its main goal is to stop or hold back some of the flooding. Sometimes you can't stop it all, but you can hold it back. We have a lot of experts who've been working on this with us, and we're very, very exciting. The lead on from the township is Tom Flynn, and he's been totally covering this. His passion and world of knowledge is as a certified floodplain manager. And this is the natural way to manage flooding. So, Tom, you want to come and introduce the team?
Thanks. Thank you so much. Thank you, Carol. Thank you for the kind words. And yeah, so I'll keep it quick, but this is super, super exciting. We've been talking about this project for a long time. The area is in great need of it for a variety of reasons that Captain Al and Dr. Roy Messeros, did I get it right? All right, great. So I won't take up too much more time, but thank you all for coming. Thank you to TV35 for taking the opportunity to embrace this and get this out to the public that can't be here tonight. So I'll turn it over to Captain Al and his team, and thanks to everyone.
Thanks, Tom. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself first then. I am Captain Al Majeski. I'm the Habitat Restoration Program Director for the American Little Society. I'm also a certified ecological restoration practitioner. In this state, there's only 11 of us. So very fortunate to have that certification. I'm also a certified nationally recognized coastal ecologist. So working on this project is great for us. Since the society started working on these types of projects, we're up to 50 right now since Hurricane Sandy. Some are small, some are large. And I brought some of my team here as well that are going to be working on this. And I have Zach. You can introduce yourself. Come on, you know you are.
Hi, folks. Yeah, I'm Zach Royal. Like Al said, I work with him at the Littoral Society. I'm the Habitat Restoration Project Manager. And then we have Julie with us.
Just introduce me.
Julie Schumacher, sitting right there. He'll be doing the slides. She is our Habitat Restoration Coordinator.
Right, and representing Rutgers University tonight is Dr. Roy Messeros.
Roy Messeros with Rutgers for the past 3 months. Prior to that, I spent 18 years with the Corps of Engineers.
Thanks. So a little bit about us. You can hit next slide. We are the American Little Society. Raise your hands if you heard of us. Oh, you have. Never mind then. Nah, we're stationed at Sandy Hook. We care for the coast. We empower others to care for the coast as well. And we do that through advocacy, education, and restoration conservation. So that's pretty much what we do as an organization right now. You can hit it. And what we're going to talk about today, and it's not going to be a long talk because we really want to hear from you a little bit more as we're kind of thinking of ideas and things and through this concept of design. But we're going to talk about living shorelines first. We weren't sure if everyone that was going to come tonight knew what a living shoreline was and the importance of living shorelines and nature-based strategies. And then why at Captain Carlson's Park? Well, you kind of heard the story already. As it's been talked about for about 8 years, why not do that natural kind of a strategy and how can we do it there? And then what's been done to date so you can understand what the team has been doing together for these past, maybe 5-6 months I think we've been together. And the current design, you're going to see a conceptual design that's not totally tweaked out yet. Partly what we have these stakeholder meeting for periodically is to really kind of tap into what the community knows and what the community sees. Because we're not out there every day. You know more about this community than we do. And how can we incorporate some of those ideas or implement that, or can we? So there's different things that we have to think about. And then next steps as we move down the road, we're going to give you kind of a tentative timeline of where we think we're going to be with this project, starting with this today. So this is pretty much just the big kickoff for the community to understand that this project could be happening and we need your help too. So living shoreline, I'll let you absorb that and digest all those words. But to us, it's just a natural way of creating habitat that can improve resiliency. It can improve water quality, carbon sequestration. You green it up, you clean the air. There's all kinds of stuff that we can do here on these shorelines. And there's a variety of methods that we've used in the past. And you're going to see some of those. I'm going to give you some good examples of what we've done in other areas around New Jersey especially. So you can get an idea of how creative we can be doing these kind of projects to really maximize the benefits ecologically and to the human-built communities. So the advantages, it's just not shoreline stabilization. It is and not just erosion control, because we can't really control the fact that erosion is going to happen, but we can reduce the rate. We can soften up that piece by attenuating waves, with getting rid of that wave energy with plants and other kind of structures that we've used. And I already mentioned you can improve water quality, of course. That's important. Hey, how are you? It can reduce flood risk. You can't stop flooding, but you can reduce that risk. Hey there, how are you? I'm good. And aesthetics, of course, recreation, and the big one I just put in here because we're starting to find more funding for this is carbon sequestration. So with climate change and sea level rise and all that, we want to go ahead and take that carbon dioxide out of the air. And these green plants, whether there's marsh or trees or things like that, we're cleaning the air at the same time and still uplifting that ecology. So brief history. Kind of was coined in the mid-1970s, this Living Shorelines concept. And what you see here is going to be kind of similar to what we're thinking about right now for Captain Carlson Park. So you have kind of a marsh sill, that's that rock line right there that kind of stops the waves from really pounding and getting rid of the sediment and things that you want to grow and establish these plants in. And then once they're established, you're much better off. So eventually you can even soften up the rocks themselves. Or sometimes one of our projects we were working on now with we had concrete mattresses and they had gaps in between. We wanted to plant the Spartina or those plants in between that so you don't see all that, but it still provides that same kind of functionality. So that was done in Chesapeake Bay. Different regions have done different things, multiple techniques. We get a lot of our stuff from national conferences that we go to as well, and we see what other people have done, other restoration practitioners around the nation or the globe, and we're like, how can we use that? One case in point, which you'll see here in a moment, is a Sladedale Preserve in Point Pleasant. I think you'd be pretty interested to see that. You can go hit it. So why do we need living shorelines? You don't need as much maintenance for them as you do for a hard structure. They absorb the energy around here, and I'm talking more back bay riverine systems like we're in now. Absorb that energy, kind of prevent that type of erosion. That's Atlantic coast, that's going to happen. And we were talking about earlier, Roy, you know, that it's a higher energy environment, very hard to keep sand on the beach there. But you'll see how we're doing it in back bay areas, little inlets and things like that to really protect the community, both the natural and the human built. And then, of course, this can be expedited. Some of the projects that we have now, for sure, you have increased development. People are right on top of these beaches. They're right on top of these dunes. They're right there. The tides, sea level rise, all these kind of things are changing so quickly. And the periodicity of storms and all that, that you're losing some of that function. So we're here to kind of reestablish that and work with these kind of things as we go. And then again, climate change, sea level rise is your biggest enemy in the marsh for sure. Some people don't know that, but even marsh plants can drown. The next thing you do is you have these giant mud flats that aren't providing anything. Go ahead. And this kind of just shows climate change and the future of New Jersey. You can see that we're on that trend moving upwards. It hasn't stopped. Not everybody agrees with why the climate's changing or sea level rise, but they do agree that it is happening. So that's the big thing. As long as we all accept it, now we can move forward to a solution of some sort. And we like to do that through the nature-based kind of structures.
It's because you can't really see the graphic here. I believe this is a 120-year history showing the change in sea level. Is that correct?
So future of New Jersey, I don't know if anybody's read New Jersey's coastal resiliency plan. That's out there. There's quite other different plans that came out. There was the coastal ecological restoration prioritization. Is that what it is? Prioritization. Anyway, SERP. I think that's what it was. Yeah. That just got released by the state too, where they're actually looking at different areas around here, knowing that these areas really need some help with restoration. You know. So what we see, and Julie liked this one too, sea level rise expects to rise 2 to 4 feet up and through the 21st century. A foot of sea level along New Jersey coast will advance the shoreline inward 120 feet. I have projects that we're working on now that since 1995 have lost over 180 feet of shoreline. And now the waves, the tides, the bay is coming to their back doors. And that's just not on a spring tide. That's almost nuisance flooding in their backyards. So what do we think about that? You know, we're going to have increased precipitation, increased frequency of large storms, and you're seeing that now. And we're seeing bigger tides, all kinds of things. And all this does is kind of increase your erosion rates over time if we don't do something naturally. The one slide I don't have in here, and you mentioned earlier, Julie, was the maritime forest in Bradley Beach that we did. And that maritime forest is really important for the fact that after Hurricane Sandy, that used to be an empty lot, and the only things, and all these other things that are on there were all gone. Big boulders from the jetties were pushed right up into the maritime forest. The only thing that survived were 4 pine trees, which is pretty interesting because nature has that way of kind of being flexible and move and understands the dynamics more or less of this environment. We're in a dynamic environment. So we went back and we planted this, and 13 years later, it's just a beautiful maritime forest that's there, and it protects homes. It reduces runoff. So we're cleaning stormwater that goes into the drains. It's a coastal lake right next to that. So there's a lot of co-benefits to these projects. And again, we greened it up. So we're treating the air too at the same time. So pretty cool. So these are examples. You already seen one in Marcel. This is before and after in Chesapeake Bay. You see initially before it's planted, and these kind of things, the tide comes in. You still want to have that interaction of tide coming through, and a lot of times they're notched to allow that, as well as for the critters to come in, you know. And then over time, as the tide rolls out, you raise the elevation behind that sill enough where you're at kind of the sweet spot for, say, Spartina alterniflora, which is around mean sea level. Between mean low water, mean sea level is the really good spot, and a little bit higher, and then you move into other vegetation. One thing, not to bore you completely, but you're only off by centimeters to bring in invasive species. So if we're in the back of the high marsh planting, say, the taller, the Spartina patens, I guess it's just big cordgrass or something, 3 centimeters off, and we're getting invasive species like Phragmites and these others that we don't really want there. But we sometimes embrace those invasives because they're already there with root structure and things like that, protecting homes. So why cut it down, try to replant and do that? Work with it, kind of a thing. So this is the one, Point Pleasant, that I was going to tell you about. This is Sladedale Preserve. And at the conference, I forget how many years back it was, Restore America's Estuaries, I think it was in New Orleans, actually, that I learned about this. And they were doing branch box breakwaters after Katrina. So we're in a low energy environment. Again, we have to look at the energy of the environment, the energetics, to kind of figure out what kind of structures can we put out here. So this is wood cribbing. We didn't have the resources for branch box, but we do have Christmas trees every year. So we got with the town, we collected all the Christmas trees, stuffed these cribbings, so you still are attenuating waves, tie that down with coconut fiber rope, and then every year we go out and we redo it. And that really engages the community. We usually do it Earth Day. Mayor Bob, who's there, he always says it's Christmas time in April, kind of a thing, which is cool, and it smells great. We get a good community involvement, and the idea is here is with these types of breakwaters, you're attenuating wave, sediment's falling out of solution, and when that does, you're naturally starting to bring back this whole area, and that's, what was it, 600 feet we lost since the 30s?
300.
300, yeah. So eventually bring that back, but if it doesn't come back, we have another idea. They're eventually going to have to dredge Beaver Dam Creek. And when they do dredge that, we can use some of that sediment, put it back here. And then recently, and you'll see some pictures of this, we did some scalloped coconut fiber logs, and about 12 inches wide in diameter, and we planted them. And then behind that, we're going to build the marsh back up too. So we have plantings and different things like that. And we're going to do it slowly over time because you can't just do it all in one day. You know, nature's going to kind of take its course. Forked River Beach, this is another one, and we don't just do all these kind of oyster reefs and breakwaters, we do marsh restoration and things like that as well, and beach and dune, but this is Forked River Beach, Lacey Township, and we canvass the entire town with what's called a HESCO basket, and they're about 4 feet high, stainless steel or corrugated steel, something like that. We put 168 units out there, and all built by hand, so we had volunteers come down to it. There's a property right here owned by Bayside Beach Club. And I think we did most of this in 2 or 3 months, this whole project. So 168, inside is a rock core, because we want to make sure we have things set down. But on the outside, we set 32 million oyster, because we have shell baskets on the outside as well. We learned from a pilot study that was funded by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for us here, how to remanufacture these HESCO baskets so they're better. You know, so rather than go in and spend the big money first, let's test it a little bit first and then move forward with the best plan. So we know it's working. They're attenuating waves. We just did the last monitoring, and Julie and Zach had done that. The water quality is good. It's very healthy for like a seawater kind of environment, that salinity. And a DO, did I say dissolved oxygen? Yeah, dissolved oxygen is great too. It's around 6 or 7, which that's what you want. We have eelgrass beds to the lee of this, and we haven't seen an establishment much yet. But this project's a baby. And a lot of times these projects may take 4 or 5 years to really start seeing results in them. And like I said, nature moves just a little bit slower. You can hit the next one. This is the example of the Fibre Log kind of a thing I was talking about. So that's coconut fiber log. You can get different diameters based on the elevations you're trying to reach. So if we're trying to get to that mean sea level piece, we might go with a 12-inch log. But in Delaware Bay, at a marsh that we did, we had to go up 36 inches. Because what's unique about Delaware Bay is it was salt hay farmed and it was diked. So the marsh subsided and it got sunk. And then when the dikes breached, you had mud flats and things, and it never really rebounded. So we had to kind of figure out a range that we could get these plants to grow. And you can see what can happen over time. And so behind here, that same arrow was once old beach and things like that, and now it's full marsh. So once we get that down of where we want things to kind of set up, that elevation, we can start moving this vegetation around. And then this is just a living reef breakwater. This is the first, and I'm doing more New Jersey kind of things for you. This is just oyster shell and whelk shell that we have. And we do now some of our reefs, like at Forked River Beach, that back reef, that's actually recycled shell from Ocean County restaurants. So 400 cubic yards came from restaurants. You ate it, we put it back in the system. And Julie and Zach saw recently that we have wild set of oyster on it. So even though we put 32 million oyster in there, now we have even more happening. And I was on a phone call today with Pew Trust and Nature Conservancy, and starting next year, we're going to take live adult oyster and start planting them among the reefs and do that kind of stuff. So it's going to be pretty interesting how we're combining all that together. But this was our first reef. That's okay. This was our first reef we did in Delaware Bay. And you can see right here, because we're thinking science, we're thinking environment too. And that's empty. There's nothing there. Well, we have horseshoe crabs here, and we also have an aquaculture industry. And they rack and bag oysters, and they grow them. So if we put rack and bags there, basically, and if you've never seen it, it's like a stand, and you put your bags on it. How high do they have to be to let the horseshoe crabs go through? The reason why the horseshoe crabs are so important, because they lay their eggs here, and then the red knot and the shorebirds come and fatten up on them, and then they fly up to, up to the Arctic. We had dips in abundance of red knot, which is the federally listed bird, and then it came back. But we found out if we didn't do they were using our beaches. And it's pretty interesting that the unrestored beaches, they didn't go to anywhere. They just came here. If we hadn't done this restoration after Sandy, we probably would have wiped out the entire population. They wouldn't have this. New Jersey's the global epicenter for red knot and for the horseshoe crab, the Atlantic horseshoe crab. So there's a lot more that goes into these projects. This one we're going to talk about is more resiliency, I think, but the co-benefits are the ecological uplift, all the other things I've been talking about, throughout. So this is one that we did in Neptune, New Jersey. We just finished this up recently. And what you're seeing here is we're doing an evolution of restoration now. We're adding several strategies all at once to kind of really get the project to work. And this is very similar to what Roy and I are going to talk about in a moment. You have the vegetative berm. And just so you know, right here's the street. And the houses are right over here. So there's a lot of things you got to think about as we do these projects. And that's why we're here talking to you guys too, because on the backside we had utilities and telephone poles. What about snow plows coming through? They need to have some room. All kinds of different things you have to think about. So there's the anthropogenic piece as well as the natural piece as you move it in. But vegetative berm, we encapsulated that with snow fence because until the plant's established, you get a good wind, all the sand's going to somebody's yard, and they're not going to like that. And then Department of Public Works has to come out and do extra work and all these kind of things. So all these kind of things we think about. Here we have, since there's not a lot of beach here, and it reminds me, it's very similar to what we saw at Cat Carlson's. We went ahead and put a sort of a sill here. We had a dilapidated bulkhead here, added a Fibre Log here to really nail it in. There was some degraded coastal marsh that we replanted and built back. And then as the tides and the waves came in, we saw that we were starting to scarp sand. And you saw that on the Atlantic side, right, on the one photos I had. And we're like, well, we don't want to lose that. We want to have a nice gentle slope to absorb energy. So we went ahead and started pinning Fibre Logs and terraced them, stepped them in a way. So as the sand was getting washed away, it would get caught. And then we plant that. And as the roots establish, eventually you have that slope that you're looking for to maximize the resiliency piece of it. And then who moved right in but fiddler crabs all over the place. They were already there, but we were kind of nervous. Are they going to come back? And from what we read, I think you can put anywhere from 6 inches to 2 feet of sand or something crazy, and they'll still come through eventually, and they did, so thank goodness. And then, like I said, fringing marsh, dune plants, and then here, that's just the marsh plants that we did. It's called Spartina alterniflora, and that was planted partially by our contractor and partially through volunteer events, as well as I think we did 25,000 plants in all for this whole thing, and we did that in a matter of a couple weeks. And again, here's just some close-ups. This is the marsh, and this is very patchy. We do have areas in this marsh that we did not plant as a control to see if it could actually self-establish itself once we have the plants there. And then, of course, the dune fencing, and then wrapped it on the back end with a snow fencing kind of piece. And then you can see we terraced the logs. And if you look at the next slide, this is what it looked like when we first got there. And this is same tide, just so you know, so you can see what can happen here as we kind of develop it, add sand, raise elevations. But really kind of an odd, pockety, always flooding, a lot of nuisance flooding. And once we came back, we built access where it's not steps or anything, and we're not actually cutting through the dune. We're rising up with the dune at a certain slope and coming down. And what we were able to do is attach coir logs down here as well to protect it from erosion. And it's working. So what you really have right now there is a whole linear kind of structure that's reducing flood risk, and we've seen that already, where it'll flood down farther down, but it won't flood here. So pretty interesting how we kind of got that to work. So in summary, for my portion here of, living shorelines can be effective. We like to incorporate that nature-based strategy and those things in a way that just gives us goods and services that not only do we need, but it's multi-generational in time, and we can build upon it. So what we're doing today, I can go back in 5 years and build on top of that. And it's not going to be a heavy lift to do that. Some may require heavy machinery, but we try to make these in a way that the community can do it. And I think that's what we have here for Captain Carlson's, is we can really do some community-based stuff and incorporate you guys into the project as well. And that's why you're here tonight. They make economic sense. Yeah, you're fast.
Thought you paused.
No. And like I said, they can be very low maintenance, but you may have to go back and replant and things like that. We definitely know that hard structure is way more expensive to maintain over time. And then, they're just more resilient against storms and bulkheads. That's what we've seen, because what the bulkheads and the hard stuff does, it reflects that energy. It creates that scour. These kind of absorb that energy. So it's a better way to go. So with everything happening out here, we just wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit about what we think about living shorelines and habitat restoration to us and how it can be done here. Oh, great. Don't worry, I brought a charger. And how we're going to incorporate that here at Captain Carlson's. So you can hit next slide. And everybody knows where it is, right? Okay.
I'd say the library on this.
Yeah, you probably could. You could do the next one. All right, and then Roy's going to come in a minute, but I want you to just remember this. I know you've been down here. I know you've seen this. But this is what it looks like today. And to me, that's a very disturbed site. It really...
It was created from the dredging that goes on there for ships. Once that dredging started coming, takes all the sand and pushes it back to the place where it was. So that's why you got that bulkhead there to prevent the street from getting affected over time.
Behind the bulkhead, is that fill too from the dredge material?
Yeah, there's a hill there. But what did you put those logs or whatever in front of that?
Oh, you're going to see. We're not saying we're going to do that necessarily.
No.
We're here to show you the ideas.
Carlson Park, are you going to do where the peninsula is also on that side?
I think it's just this stretch of it.
Yeah, just this stretch that I had. Yeah.
That's all.
But that's the marina.
Yeah, that's a whole different project going on, right?
I'm sorry, if anybody discussed this earlier, and if I'm being redundant.
All, and I love you all, anything downstream, please save our water, it will be so wonderful. But the industrial water we have there, well, how does that affect, or I might have missed that part, that the ecology is gonna help save that water? or-
So it'll be localized. We're not going to, the whole Arthur Kill is not going to be treated by this one piece of property.
I mean, how will that affect all that nature that we're gonna put back there?
Well, whatever there is going to come anyway. Yeah, I mean, that's what we've seen.
No, but would it flourish under that? You showed more like those beaches
yeah,
in Park
yeah.
and Jersey.
Yeah, so,
Targeted vegetation for this project
Or-
would survive.
Or
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
I was here when I was a kid, I used to go swimming at night. There was tortured crabs all over the place, blue claw, everything. They all got like wiped out with the pollution, the pests and water. They all moved out. the water exactly is getting better. Life is coming back.
Right, and what you'll see too from the plantings, we call it phytoremediation. So it's going to take up some of those toxins that are in the soil already out there, which is a good thing, which could make it better for some of the, maybe the blue crabs come back, I don't know yet. But that's what we monitor. We monitor to see what it is now. And that's what I was going to show you as we move through this. You're going to see the renderings that Rutgers has come through. And it's not necessarily set in stone that this is what we're doing yet. But I wanted to show you all the different other strategies and concepts and how we can kind of maybe push them together to make it work, you know, in that way. So I'll hop to the next one, Jules. All right. Do you want to come on, Roy?
Yes, can you go back to the...
Slide your step.
Yes. Can you go back to the prior slide?
Okay.
So I'm with Rutgers. Rutgers is doing the design for this. You covered a lot. I'm not sure if everybody caught all that, but I just wanted to say, does anybody have questions what was covered so far? Just to give an opportunity to go back to what you talked about. You could ask questions at the end, but you covered a lot, so I wanted to make sure that everybody was up to speed with what was happening so far.
What you're working with is just going to be on a beach here, because this right here.
It's going to-
I was talking about the peninsula, is all right here.
But that's
And that's
gonna be
part of the beach also.
No, I believe it's limited to about 800 feet, 600 feet.
Yeah, 600, I think.
So it's
It's just a little bit of the beach is going to be preserved.
No, the whole beach from the thing to.
it's going to be a project where you put back sand, material that keeps riprap to keep the sand in place, and then vegetation to keep everything together.
It used to be all down, it used to be all vegetation.
Well, it used to be in this area, used to be much different. And I just wanted to comment that a project like this, or any type of marsh island like in Jamaica Bay, can attenuate storm surge. However, in a concept of 600 feet, it's not going to change flooding in Woodbridge. So it would have to be much more of the shoreline and a greater extent of the shoreline in order to have a meaningful attenuation of storm surge.
And that wouldn't have been ours, it's the nature of it. It's wonderful if you could help us, because it would be.
So this is really like to showcase what a natural shoreline could look like, but not to stop flooding, because it's not enough to do that, because it doesn't cover enough of the shoreline to do that. So the project is starting from really about where this picture was taken from, because behind me, if I was standing on this section of beach, we're leaving a space to have beach access to where the actual Carlson Park is. So it's about 600 feet extending in this way. The bulkhead would remain in place. Where we are right now with this is, I'll call it a 30% design, because we can get our head into numbers, or you can call it conceptual. And after a meeting like tonight, we get together, we talk about it, we advance the design from conceptual/30% to about 60%, review it, discuss it, then it advances to 95%, then we start putting together a cost estimate, and at some point you advertise and you construct the project. And permits. You have to have the design 95% near complete before you could submit for permits. What we have tonight, conceptual design 30%, is not adequate for getting it permitted. So we're not at that point yet with this project. Please.
How do you build up from where the water's edge is to the bulkhead?
You
gotta
placed,
make some kind of wall, because I was told, I've never experienced it, but there was at moon tide, the water's all the way up to the bulkhead. So how do you stop the water getting up to that point?
I'll go back to what you said. We're not trying to stop nature, we're trying to work with nature. So we have some slides that will show you what this will look like during a high tide cycle.
Okay.
But in natural.
And remember when I showed South Riverside Drive, that living shoreline? That was the same kind of concept. So we still get water all the way up to the dunes. But we
Okay,
figured
that's
how to
what I
work
meant,
with that, because as you get erosion and things, and we've been talking about quite a few different ideas. We have the general concept. That's why you're here too. And then we're like, if we did this and that, these different strategies that we have together, I think we can make this work. So your word, when you said, what about sand going away? Yeah, we have ways of keeping it on the toe edge without building walls.
As long as you build the sand up.
So the vegetation,
Like this right now, so the water takes it, pulls it back in.
Yeah, you want to build it up, and usually do anywhere from 8-to-1 ratio is really the best slope that we like to attenuate energy, things like that. But it depends on how much distance you have. Sometimes it can be the regulators. It depends what you're working with. You have to tweak things, as you go. And then we learn as we go too. So once that we all are pretty happy with this design and we build it, we don't leave. We still come back and watch it, because things are going to change. Mother Nature is the way she is, and we can't always design everything even through the best modeling, to make it work.
Let's go to the next slide, please. Oh, there you are. And I apologize because you can't see it well. This is existing conditions, not proposed. So this is the existing piece of shoreline that's there already, and this is where the bulkhead would be. Next slide. This is what we've done so far, because in order to do design, engineers like me, we want data to look at. So bathymetry, you have to know what the offshore slope is like, how quickly it gets deep, how shallow it is in order for us to construct the project. So we did some bathymetry, wake study to talk about how much wave energy might be occurring at this site, grain size analysis, how big are the grain particles that exist on this beach, so we could work with that in terms of how to retain the existing sand and how to add on top of that sand by bringing in additional material. So that's what the grain size analysis was for. Project team meetings, that's what we're doing tonight. And the conceptual design / 30% design, which is where we currently are with this. So this is the conceptual design. I've been saying the 30% design. We're here tonight really to look at this, get feedback from the community, and then change the design as needed. So what's in this design is stone. I call that riprap. It's not been sized, but it's not going to be it's not gravel. It's something that might be 6 inches in diameter on average, and that is intended to act as a energy attenuation for the mild wave climate that's there. So behind that stone would be placed sediment grain material or beach sand that would be filled in place. Where that material is coming from is to be determined. It's not going to be scraped off of the bottom of the existing beach. That would not be appropriate to do that. So we would then place sand, which acts as a substrate to plant the vegetation. In the Spartina alterniflora, it's a cordgrass. Why don't we just call it cordgrass tonight? It's a cordgrass that wants to be at mean tidal elevation, and it exists very well where the tide is moving up and down. So it's a location here where the tide is coming up to the bulkhead, retreating. So that's perfect for Spartina cordgrass because that's the environment that it likes to grow in. And with that tidal flushing, the idea is that vegetation, once it's established, can act as a sediment trap. So with the tide coming up and down, the small wave climate that's there, any sediment that's moving through this area would allow to be trapped here and build that additional substrate for this Spartina to continue to flourish. Proposed was this overlook point. If you're a bird watcher / for birding, that's what that could be used for. There's also this boardwalk and path that's being proposed so that you would walk not on the planted vegetation because that would not be desirable. You wouldn't want to do that. Like you can't walk on dunes in New Jersey and in Maryland. That's a no-no when you do that. So if you did that here after you plant the Spartina, that would impact the project in a negative way. Down here between where this is ending and where the park is, we leave some distance. There's not an actual distance there, but what is it, 100 feet, 200 feet, some open beach existing that would be where you could access the water. So a concern that I have presenting in the conceptual design is you couldn't walk on this. You're not supposed to walk on the riprap stone. You'd be able to observe from here and walk along here. Access to the water would be from this site, or on the other side of the park, there is a boat launch. So my concern is this doable in the community? Would the community be happy with this conceptual design? And from the conceptual design, after getting impact, discussing it more, we developed this further to the 60% design.
That red line says the existing bulkhead.
Yes.
Now, this is the new part that you're going to be growing here. What is this here? Is that water?
It would be water at a high tide, but existing high tide I think only comes to about here. So this is going to have material placed in it. So it would be, I think, go to the next slide, please. This one gets lost in the weeds. Keep going. This is a conceptual rendering of what it would actually look like. So there's the existing bulkhead. There's the water, there's the stone. The stone is there to protect the material that you're placing and to protect the vegetation that you're planting. And this is what smooth cordgrass would look like. And this is wrapped around here on the south side, and then where I'm standing was where it'd be the open beach access would still be.
So according to the last picture, you got the bulkhead, you got water. That's where the grass is now, and then you build another pathway on the other side of this grass?
Can you go back to where I had that?
Boardwalk is towards
The boardwalk is on, see?
Yeah, so-
the boardwalk here. Okay, so what you
Yes.
just showed us was the grass, okay? Now,
That slide that I showed you did not have this boardwalk in it.
no, I realize that, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. But there's water here now. So in between the bulkhead and this is water here. But how could there be water there if you have the grass growing there?
Well, the elevation,
The other side
It's
too. Yeah.
the slope
Like
of
the
the berm,
slope.
so that vegetation behind the
hill.
bulkhead is what that other
That's
wasn't.
Yes.
not water, that's.
That's the extra vegetation between the bulkhead and the road.
where did I say it
It
was
might have
water?
just been
On the
misspoken.
next slide, you said the water was in between the pathway and the bulkhead. I didn't miss it, that's what he said.
If I said, then I spoke incorrectly, because the plan is to put sand here, and that raises the elevation. So the high tide won't come up the way it used to, and there was also some discussion tonight about having a bermed, if you know what that means, place additional material at the base of the bulkhead to raise that elevation too. So the water,
How far do you intend to go from the bulkhead to where you just talked about the berm?
well, the berm would be right up, so this is a good slide to be on to answer that question. The berm would be material that we place close to where the bulkhead is, and then you would see this area here that's,
But it'd be up against the bulkhead possibly. This is just, that's why I want to find out, like,
It was like that at one time, but there's a lot of land you gotta put there because those big tugs in the ocean, not ocean lines, but they put in some waves. They used to-
well, they may, but that's the idea of this stone, is to protect from wave breaking, so you're not going to influence the vegetation. But once this vegetation is influenced, it should, established, it should remain in place, whatever the
and
high
it's
tide is
wave
doing.
energy too. That's the concept, you know.
So this is,
So you won't get that erosionary force as hard up against the bulkhead. If the thought was, talking tonight just about it together, if we didn't do some sort of a, oh, that's okay, you can hear me, right? Yeah. If we don't do some kind of a vegetative berms to absorb some of that energy that might get through along that bulkhead, it's gonna reflect. And it's gonna come back and it's gonna eat away from the other side. So we gotta work with these different strategies together. I was curious, because I know on one of our sites that we've done before, people like to walk the beach too. And do we leave a strip behind the marsh where the berm is of just sand, not a boardwalk or anything like that, but maybe you want to walk through there. So I don't know, that we have to talk about that, and sometimes there could be reasons that you can't do that, you know, so that's what I want to know, like, I haven't seen anybody really fishing there. And I don't, see, that's important to know. So that,
Coming back. See, on the other side, Staten Island side, when all those boats were really used, there used to be silencers, slow, no wake. That was a big plus, keeping the beach intact, that as far as that was concerned.
can you go back a few slides to the one that shows the boat thing? Because I'm glad, there it is. I'm glad you're bringing this up, because Roy found a really great app that we can track the vessel movement out here.
That's a big plus.
So, and that's what you see right here. So this vessel, I can click on my phone, and we did a wake study out here because we're concerned about the same thing. What elevation do we need if we have these huge wakes coming
That's
through?
what, yeah, because the waves are gonna go.
It'll tell you what the vessel is, the size of the vessel, all kinds of, what speed it's going at that time. And we would have our person down here watching and timing the waves. What we saw from our study, and it's not all inclusive, was that the large vessels and the tugs and things that come through, they're not really producing a huge wake there. It seemed like the smaller vessels coming out from the marina, and you know, they're gonna power up a little bit, and that kind of hit it. But overall, because I was nervous when Chris said, oh, you know, you can probably go out there and get drowned, like 5-foot wakes. I'm like, yeah, there's some big vessels that come through here, but they're pretty slow. So I think on the average, we saw what, 6 inches tops?
6 inches.
From large vessels coming through, because they're going so slow now, you know? So that's good, and we can design to that. You know, that's why we want to be aware of that. But I wanted to show that, because Roy found this great app, and it's really cool to kind of watch and say, oh, look,
All
who's
of
here,
it-
fanboy and all this. You know?
all the boaters know about it, it's not a
Well, I
big
did,
secret.
I'm like, hey, that's cool.
This is the high tide.
So you don't notice a stone here on the seaward side because it's now inundated at high tide.
That'd be great if you could accomplish that.
And from that too, you can see the high tide line. Now that's not necessarily the spring tide, which would be a little bit farther, but it kind of shows you where it comes up within
Now,
that
where's
margin.
the beach that you're gonna be walking on if you're not allowed to go on the grass part?
Well, that's, go back to the slide where I showed where the beach would stay in place, because to me, this is, this conceptual design is really important because what we're showing you don't want to walk on the project versus what remains that you can walk on.
Oh, so just a little part,
Yes.
have a little part of the beach left.
Yeah, that's what this is showing.
And that's what we were talking about earlier today too. So depending how far out we can go, because Roy and I were talking, for New Jersey, you have what's called the 1977 Tidelands Claim Line. Okay, it's a regulatory line that shows where shoreline things were in 1977. And by regulation, you can build out to that line. So even on this, if when we get farther into this, the 77 line might be out here, which means we can have beach all the way out to that. It might be only 25 feet, it might be 90 feet. It
Well,
depends.
that needs to be balanced with the cost that you'll
That's right.
have to build this project. Because the bigger the width, the more money it's going to cost.
So what we've done in our organization is we usually build it out, we want the Porsche. And then at least we're permitted that far out. If we don't have the money to do it, we either do it in phases over time, but we could get there, you know, so you put down everything that you want, and then you get it permitted. Now you have that for 5 years, and you can renew that with the state in 5 years. I think we've got 10-year permits with the Army Corps right now for doing stuff, which is really cool. So we can take all these different ideas and say, here's what we can really get, but we might not get all the money right away. And it might take 5, 6 years to find all the funding. So you start in phases. And maybe the first phase here is to get that sill out. You know, once you have that in place and you know where, because the sill can actually go outside the 1977 Tidelands Claim Line. You're allowed to do that by regulation for a living shoreline permit.
But unfortunately, we don't have that line here for reference.
Yeah, so I wish I could show you because I don't know where it is. It could be closer, it could be farther away. We've had one project where the 77 line was right on the bulkhead. We're like, oh. And we've had others where it's 150 feet out.
You want to go to the next slide? Keep going, because we've talked about this one, and
Next step?
yeah, you want to talk about the next steps?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, this is another snapshot or one of the plan sheets that we have for the 30% design. What you're looking at here would be the armor stoning. That's just, you know, it's a representation to an engineer what that is showing you, but that would be stone. This would be the placed sand with the Spartina cordgrass planted on it. This is not showing that proposed boardwalk. That's a function of the cost. If you want to pay for the proposed boardwalk, that's going to be more money. And then you would, a caveat just popped into my head. Could you stand on that boardwalk and surf cast? No, that wouldn't work well because you'd be taking your fishing line through the planted cordgrass, and that's not a good idea. That area of the cordgrass after this project is built is not an area where you want people to be, because you want to keep it like a dune at the Jersey Shore. You're not supposed to walk on it once the sand is placed, the dune is built, and you have the vegetation growing. So you're more of where Rutgers is doing the design. You're covering a lot of this. I'll turn the mic back to you. I'll stand here in case the next slide is such that I should talk more.
Oh, no worries. So the whole thing is feedback. What do you use that property for now, kind of a thing. And we've talked about this in pretty good detail. What would you like to see there that still gives that ecological uplift that we're looking for and that resiliency, but also public use if you're looking for that as well and access to things. Don't have to have a boardwalk, you know, that we don't have to do these. We can make sand paths. We can do other things that are more natural because then we can come back in over time. And if we need to add more sand to combat sea level rise, we can. You know, and you're right. We can. It's definitely a sediment trap. And that's good too, because maybe naturally it can compete with sea level rise, but we're seeing that right now the Spartina marshes that we work on are not, and they need help. So you have to do some kind of amendment. So I was just curious about, you know, you mentioned people fishing there. I haven't seen them because I usually see them on the pier, and that's good to know. And
I went by the boat launch.
Okay, yeah, I see them there.
There's a lot of fishermen that go out with waders.
Ah, okay.
Usually early in the morning when the fish are in, you can see a dozen men all along the shoreline in waders.
And because I know it's really shallow sloped. And how far does that go out? Have you seen them how far out?
We had the bathymetry that we did. If you have to zoom in on the plan sheet that I sent you,
Okay.
it's on there.
Okay, yeah, because I'm guessing they're going out like 40, 50 feet, right, trying to hit the channel, right?
Yeah.
As best as they can.
That's where the big fish are.
Yeah. So these are good things to know because for us, when we talk about it as a group and look at the design, we may need to have certain little access points outside that sill where they can have access, but safely get access. I wouldn't want to see someone get their foot caught, break an ankle, or anything like that. So we have to kind of think that through and talk with the municipality as well and all that. But so after we get some feedback from you guys, like Roy said, we'll go to the next design step. We'll incorporate some of these things that we're going to learn from you tonight, or we already have learned, the uses that you kind of want out of it. Can we incorporate that into the final design? And then we'll take that design, look at it, do another stakeholders meeting like we are tonight, and say, here's what we're going to take to the regulators for now. Doesn't necessarily have to be at 90% for them, but just to show them, here's what we're thinking. What challenges do we have in the regulatory world? And so it's called a joint permit process meeting, and it's with the Army Corps and state representatives and all those experts that'll say, oh, you better think about this. What about that? And then we address that in our design as well. Once we have that, and we get it up to about 90%, 95, then we're going to submit state and federal permits, applications, and our tidelands licensing. We'll get all that out there. The good thing about the general permit 24 for the state is it's free. So there are no fees associated with that. Federal permits are free. And what we've worked out as an organization over time since Hurricane Sandy is tidelands licensing for us is $100 a year. So it can go, when people used to build docks, they get charged something like $500,000 tideland license fee. It was crazy. And that would price us out of any grant funding we're trying to get. And of course, we would find funding. We've already been talking about that. You have the infrastructure bill out there right now. My understanding that's going to continue for some time. They just got done with, that's okay. I know this thing. They just had the Inflation Reduction Act. That's a one-time deal. That was $575 million. I just saw a grant today, RFP, for over $1 billion from EPA for climate change and things like that, and addressing some of the things we're doing here. The state has a natural climate solutions grant. It's from a greenhouse gas initiative, and that's out every year now. So there is funding out there, open space funding, all kinds of different things that we can look into over time as we develop this concept. The idea is to hopefully submit permits by spring. Yeah.
One of the other things I'd like to mention, I know you're gonna put a lot of rocks to deflect the wave energy. We have a lot of Canadian geese, and they tend to be attracted to rocks. That's where they lay their eggs. Is there anything you could do to deter more Canadian geese from coming?
Well, we have to in the beginning, just so you know, because they'll eat everything. And they'll fly in right away. We have bird deterrent strategies that we use in the beginning to let the Spartina flourish, at least establish. For the rock piece and them being there, I'm sure, so I'm doing one project in Forked River Beach. We have a memo of understanding with the state. And part of that is to do avian deterrence because the birds land on the structures. So we're monitoring to see if we have enough birds that do land there. And by them defecating, they're changing the localized water quality around. So if you have a whole bunch of birds and they're there for a month and a half, it can really raise the levels. So,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say another thing with geese too is that they generally like flat areas that they can see.
Yeah.
So like a nice mowed lawn or something like that. So when you establish a lot of taller vegetation like that, it might naturally
Deter them. Yeah, that's true.
It's not the ideal that they're looking for.
Before the grass grows, I mean, no, that's all, you've got the rocks there.
Yeah.
They can still go on the rocks because the grass isn't grown yet. Can
But
you
they
put
don't like rocks.
Maybe you could put chicken wire?
Yeah, so
we do all kinds of stuff, but not the chicken wire necessarily, but
like a deterrent. We could run lines and have like
it's
tape
called
that's
called Mylar tape. It's reflective tape, and it makes a little noise. They won't land where that is. So we put that out on all our marsh areas in the beginning, because once the plant gets big enough, they're not going to eat it. They like the little ones,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that boardwalk, is that gonna go right to the established lake?
They don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to do the boardwalk yet. We're still discussing that. I don't know if it fits.
Take money away from it, they need it really for.
I agree with you. And that's one thing you've been talking about too, So we want to rather, the funding that we do get eventually, really put it into the project and the natural piece of it.
Good luck with
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think there's definitely, knowing people fish there in waders, which is good. They don't even have to access that sill. They can go right around it and fish in front of it.
Yeah, once you
You
get
know
the
they're not
beach
gonna do that.
access, you get the water.
You hope. And you put a sign up, please fish in front of sill.
access. You can't go straight to the beach.
You got a lot of old fish.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
We got it.
No, but it's make it nice for them, they'll respect them.
Yeah. And the other thing I had on here,
Natural improvement that.
as part of all our restoration projects that we do with the society and our partners, there's always an outreach component. That's very important because the more you tell your project to other people, they pass it on. You know, we do stuff with social media. You'd see signage that says restoration in progress where you might be, and like a QR code. And we give usually weekly updates through blogging and stuff like that. So you can just, oh, what's happening this week? Or, oh, I better be prepared for that. Or how many trucks are coming down today? This kind of thing to kind of keep you more informed. And then we do meetings like this. And then also, when you see all the plants that we have there, we would definitely do volunteer plantings. We've already talked about inviting the kids and the students and things like that to do to kind of help monitor it. So Zach and Julie, they've written citizen, community science plans where the kids come down. We tell them, here's what we're monitoring, because we have to monitor by permit. And what are we trying to do here for density-wise with the plants? Are they staying? Are they not? Many times you have to come back and replant, you know, just patches. Not everything takes right away. And that's what I was trying to say is we're here. So once we get the grant funding or the funding there, we don't just let it sit, you know. And I was saying it to somebody before, it's not going to be pretty at first. It takes time. But eventually it's going to look good, you know. I wish I would have brought that one slide I have of Thompson's Marsh that we did, where it was just mud flats and all this kind of stuff. And it was a low energy environment, so we could use the coconut fiber logs. We did a whole acre with 12 people. We're in the mud, planting, you know, staking this down. We dredged material from an adjacent creek, raised the elevation up by 1.75 to 2 feet, I think, roughly 2.25 feet. That's substantial. And seeded it. 4 years later, we had 81% coverage of that entire marsh, and we actually restored another 0.3 to 0.4 acres because we changed the hydrology there, and sediment was dropping out on the outside of this kind of a structure. The coconut fiber logs eventually they go away, they vanish, but the 81% coverage, that's the target that you want for carbon sequestration, and we did that in 4 years. So it takes time, but the first couple of years, like, ooh, what's this thing? No, it's not, but that's pretty good for marsh establishment, anywhere between 3 and 5 years.
Yeah, that's great.
And then, like I said, finally, you know, we do the volunteer stuff, and we would love to work with the library too as we move forward to really kind of provide some of that outreach, little workshops and things like that, get the kids down there if we can. It's just a really good way to get the community involved. So this isn't our project telling you what we want to do. We know the strategies we can incorporate. We want to know what you need too, so we can come to an agreement that, hey, this is great, and we want to be a part of it, you know.
You're a team, both sides.
You got it. I always say, involve the public first, right off the bat, don't I?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they know what I talk about.
Starting the community.
Yeah. So do you guys have any other questions?
I might have just missed it. Is the waterfront here a low energy area that you're saying?
I think it's more medium energy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the low energy that we have, I mean, you don't have a wide area of fetch. You do have the vessel movement. I think it's just a little more open area.
I think it's going to be relevant. So if it's the coastal Atlantic Ocean, it's very small energy. If you compare it to Chesapeake Bay, maybe it's medium. So it's not very energetic because of where it is and how it's kind of sheltered. It's a narrow, Arthur Kill's a narrower channel.
But I didn't see, you know, like we had talked, I don't see necessarily doing coir logs or coconut fiber logs up front. You'd lose them over time, I think, pretty quickly, and they may pop. And you still get ice here, right? Yeah.
I'm a civil engineer.
You know these things, yeah.
Engineers want solid structure.
Yeah. But we could incorporate that behind, you know, the coir logs, because that way we don't lose our sand. It'll eventually lay out until the plant's established. So it just takes time. And Roy's an expert in his field. He knows what he's doing too. So together, I think we'll come together on a really good concept for you guys next time you see it, and it'll incorporate the things we talked about tonight as best as we can. That's it. Well, yep.
So you said that you had to find like a sweet spot for the amount, the elevation that you have to find. Is this waterfront something that needs a lot of lifting, or is it kind of?
I would defer to
I think
Roy.
Right now, it depends on where you want to do your plantings versus where the high and low tide is. I think where it is right now, there's not a lot of sand that would need to be added here. We didn't do quantities yet, but just knowing the tidal range. So the tidal range can influence whether or not you want to use money for sand or not, but the tidal change right now is adequate for Spartina. It would need some sand though.
Yeah, if you look up towards the marina, right, and you see there's a hummock of cordgrass, and then it stops. And then what we saw is that's when the small boats come out too, and it misses that right there, that piece, and then rolls down. But the elevation is like that much different between the beach and that hummock. So, I mean, we would do more precise measurements for that, and then we usually stake it out on our projects so you know what the elevation is by slope, and then that's where you place your sand. And again, it depends on that regulatory line, that 77 line, how far out we can go.
The cordgrass needs to have the tidal fluctuation.
Exactly.
So if it doesn't receive any of the tidal signal, that's relatively upland, that's not appropriate for spartina cordgrass. So the spartina of the cordgrass is, you need to have the tidal signal up and down to make that vegetation happy.
And that's why you see in some of these, we notch them and things like that. So there's a little bit of a lower elevation in spots to make sure you're getting that water through. It may not work here, it may. I mean, these are the things that we look at. And then we come up with that design that's going to be more functional. So did you guys want to say anything else?
Well, I'm just gonna say, I think it's very exciting because, sorry, water is such a natural, beautiful thing, and we're not known for, and any help that we get, it will be wonderful to try to bring that all back, because the Woodbridge River and all it's very beautiful here, and it does need to be loved back by all of us.
We're very fortunate that the refineries went by. Hess, when they were over here, had their own line. I forgot how big it was, but whenever they had a spill, lousy product went right up the yard to kill underwater. Nobody knew about it, but the guys that worked there informed us about what was there, you know, so.
So it needs loving, that's what he's really saying, we need a lot of loving over here to enjoy that beautiful water again.
The thing at one time, that beach used to be occupied with people all the time swimming in there.
Yeah, I think you've showed us pictures, Boynton Beach, right?
I have
Yeah.
pictures of him down there on
Why did my shark?
the Caber, and there was a slide in it, it was really beautiful. Any help is gonna be so wonderful.
We thank you guys for coming around
And we would love to help
Try to
rally the
beautify the
community
town.
to help.
Thanks
Oh,
to
cool.
the public. Thanks to the public that came tonight to voice your opinions and thoughts.
Oh, it's just wonderful, and I'm probably people are just busy and tired, I'm sure more senior residents would have came, because it's just gonna be wonderful.
I'm just glad my laptop made it.
Yeah, locked up, or projector.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.